What happens when the comforting rhythm of a nation's morning is interrupted by something sharp, unexpected, and quietly dangerous? On most days, nothing truly dramatic ever happened on Lorraine. The show lived in warmth, in reassurance, in soft lighting and familiar smiles that felt almost like a cup of tea shared with an old friend. It was the kind of program people watched half awake, wrapped in blankets, children still asleep upstairs, kettles whistling softly in the background. A show where voices were gentle, laughter came easily, and the world, at least for an hour, felt manageable. That morning began exactly like that. The studio lights glowed with their usual amber warmth, bouncing gently off polished surfaces and muted pastel backdrops. The air carried the faint scent of fresh coffee and hairspray. Camera operators moved with practiced ease, rolling cables, checking angles, adjusting focus with the muscle memory of people who had done this hundreds of times before. The hum of production was calm, almost meditative. At the center of it all sat Lorraine Kelly. She adjusted the cuff of her jacket, glanced briefly at her notes, and smiled as the countdown echoed quietly through her earpiece. 5. 4. 3. Her smile settled into place naturally, not forced, not performed, just hers. When the red camera light flicked on, she leaned forward slightly. Eyes bright, posture open. "Good morning," she said warmly, and just like that, millions of living rooms across Britain felt a little less lonely. The opening segment flowed smoothly. Light banter. A gentle joke. A comment about the weather that drew an easy laugh from the crew. Lorraine was exactly who viewers expected her to be, reassuring, grounded, present. Someone who never talked at people. Only with them. But behind the scenes, something was shifting. Just beyond the edge of the set, in a corridor that felt cooler, quieter, and far more tense, Prince Harry stood waiting. He was dressed impeccably, of course. Every detail intentional. But there was a stiffness to him that morning, a tightness in his jaw, a restlessness in his hands. He glanced at his phone, then away again, as if already bored by the situation he had willingly walked into. A producer approached, voice polite, measured. "We'll bring you on in just a moment." Harry nodded, but didn't smile. His eyes drifted past her, scanning the studio with an expression that wasn't curiosity so much as assessment. Like someone entering a space they didn't quite respect. Lorraine rose from her chair as he was guided onto the set. She did what she always did, stood fully, extended her hand, met him with warmth that had never failed her before. "Welcome," she said, genuinely. "It's so lovely to have you here today." Harry took her hand. His grip was brief. Transactional. He sat before she did, already leaning back slightly, already detached. "Thank you for having me," he replied, voice flat, eyes drifting toward the nearest camera rather than the woman sitting across from him. It was subtle. Almost nothing. But people who worked in live television knew better. Energy mattered. Tone mattered. And something about his presence landed wrong. Lorraine didn't miss it. If she noticed, she didn't show it. She adjusted smoothly, crossing her legs, angling her body toward him in a way that was open, inclusive. Decades of experience had taught her that sometimes guests arrived guarded. Sometimes cold. Her job wasn't to confront. It was to invite. So, she began gently, eyes warm with sincere curiosity. "You've been involved in so many causes lately. What's been inspiring you most at the moment?" Harry shifted. He didn't look at her this time either. He looked straight ahead, chin lifted slightly, as though addressing an invisible audience beyond the lens. "Well," he said slowly, "what people don't really understand is the weight of responsibility that comes with my position." A few crew members glanced at one another. "There's a burden," he continued, "that not everyone can comprehend. It's not something most people ever experience." Lorraine nodded, patient, encouraging. She had heard this tone before, from politicians. From celebrities, from people who mistook gravity for importance. I'm sure many of our viewers can relate to feeling pressure in their own lives, she said carefully. Even if the circumstances are different. What advice would you give someone struggling with their own challenges? Harry let out a short laugh. It wasn't kind. It wasn't amused. It was dismissive. Lorraine, he said, shaking his head slightly, I don't think you really understand. My struggles aren't comparable to ordinary ones. The word ordinary landed heavier than it should have. When I wake up, he went on, I'm thinking about global issues. About legacy. About history. Most people are just worried about breakfast. The studio fell into a strange stillness. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air felt different, thicker, charged. Lorraine's smile didn't vanish, but it tightened just enough to be noticeable if you were looking closely. She was. Well, she replied evenly, many people are dealing with very serious concerns. Jobs. Health. Family. Those are real pressures. Harry waved a hand, as if brushing away something trivial. Sure. Sure. But it's all relative, isn't it? He tilted his head slightly. I mean, let's be honest. Your viewers, lovely as I'm sure they are, they're not exactly changing the world. A producer stiffened behind the cameras. Lorraine inhaled slowly. Deeply. The kind of breath you take when instinct tells you something is wrong, but professionalism demands control. I think our viewers do incredible things every day, she said, voice firmer now. They raise families. Care for others. Work tirelessly to build lives. That is changing the world. Harry smiled. It was the kind of smile that never reached the eyes. Of course, he said lightly. I'm not saying they don't try. I'm just saying. There are different levels of impact. Lorraine placed her notes on the table. Flat. Deliberate. I'm not sure I understand what you mean, she said. Are you suggesting that someone's value depends on privilege? Oh, come on, Harry replied, leaning back, visibly bored. Don't twist my words. Some people are born to lead. Others are born to follow. That's just how things work. Something shifted in Lorraine's expression. Not anger. Not shock. Resolve. I find that perspective troubling, she said quietly. Some of the most remarkable people I've met started with nothing and earned everything. Harry scoffed. Actually scoffed. That's very sweet, he said. Very inspiring. But let's not pretend a shop worker is on the same level as someone like me. The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Lorraine leaned forward slightly, eyes steady now, voice calm but sharpened. Respect, she said, is earned. Harry laughed again, hollow, sharp. You know what your problem is? He said. You've done this cozy little show for so long, you actually believe you matter. The cameras kept rolling. And in that exact moment, something irreversible began. Lorraine didn't speak right away. She simply looked at him. And the silence that followed was heavier than any argument, the kind of silence that signals a line has just been crossed. The silence after Harry's words didn't just linger, it pressed. It wrapped itself around the studio like a held breath, stretching longer than felt comfortable, longer than live television ever allowed. The kind of pause that made producers instinctively reach for their headsets, fingers hovering, unsure whether to intervene or trust the moment to resolve itself. Lorraine Kelly didn't move. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. For the first time since the cameras had started rolling that morning, the warmth she was known for was gone, not replaced by anger, but by something far steadier. Something harder. She straightened slowly in her chair, the fabric of her jacket whispering softly as she shifted. When she spoke, her voice was calm, controlled, and unmistakably deliberate. I've been doing this job for more than 30 years, she said. I've interviewed prime ministers, world leaders, people who hold real power. Harry's expression flickered, just for a moment, before settling into something dismissive again. But I've also spoken to nurses, Lorraine continued. To teachers, firefighters, carers, single parents. And do you know what I've learned? She paused. The cameras tightened in slightly, sensing instinctively that something important was happening. That every single one of them has value. Every single one of them deserves respect. Harry exhaled sharply through his nose. That's lovely, he said. Truly. But let's not pretend this is the same thing. Some people have influence. Others don't. That's just reality. Behind the cameras, the control room erupted in silent chaos. One producer mouthed, "Oh no." Another glanced at the clock. Someone whispered, "He's digging." Lorraine felt it too, that unmistakable sense that the interview had slipped beyond recovery. There was no redirecting this. No gentle segue. No recipe or anecdote that could smooth over what had just been said. This isn't about influence, she replied. It's about respect. Harry leaned forward now, elbows resting casually on his knees, posture loose in a way that suggested confidence, superiority. Lorraine, he said, voice dropping slightly, you're confusing kindness with importance. Talking about bake-offs and soap operas doesn't make you a serious figure. A ripple of shock moved through the studio. A camera operator stiffened. A sound technician froze mid-adjustment. Lorraine's jaw tightened, just a fraction. You think this show isn't important? She asked. I think, Harry replied smoothly, that you've mistaken familiarity for significance. You make people comfortable. That's nice. But comfort doesn't change the world. The switchboard lights began blinking furiously. Phones were lighting up. Messages flooding in. Viewers at home, who had tuned in expecting warmth, were now sitting upright on their sofas, eyes locked on screens, fingers flying across keyboards and phones. Lorraine inhaled slowly. This show, she said, has been a place where people feel seen. Where they feel heard. Where they're reminded that their lives matter. Harry shrugged. And that's exactly my point. You're giving them validation without substance. That was it. Lorraine placed both hands flat on the desk. The sound was soft, barely audible, but the intent behind it was unmistakable. I won't allow you to speak about our viewers like that, she said. Firmly. Harry blinked. Once. Then laughed. You won't allow it? He repeated. Lorraine, do you hear yourself? He leaned back again, crossing his arms. Let me be clear. I didn't come here to be lectured by a daytime host. I came here as a courtesy. To give you a little relevance. Something changed in the room. Not just tension, alignment. Crew members who had been frozen now stood straighter. A producer stepped closer to the edge of the set, eyes fixed on Lorraine, waiting. Lorraine's voice dropped. You came here as a guest, she said. And you've spent this entire conversation insulting the very people who support this program. Harry scoffed again, louder this time. Oh. Don't be dramatic. You're acting like I've committed some great offense. You have, Lorraine replied. You've shown contempt. For people who will never be on your level, Harry snapped. The words echoed. And for the first time, Harry looked directly at Lorraine, not bored, not amused, irritated. Do you know who you're talking to? He demanded. Lorraine met his gaze without hesitation. I know exactly who I'm talking to. Her voice didn't waver. I'm talking to someone who believes their birth makes them superior. And I'm telling you that on this show, that attitude isn't welcome. Harry's face flushed. This is unbelievable, he said, pushing his chair back slightly. I give you my time. My presence, and this is the gratitude I get. Lorraine stood. Slowly. Deliberately. The movement alone sent a shockwave through the studio. She had remained seated through heated debates, political clashes, emotional interviews. Standing now was not accidental. My reputation, she said calmly, is built on respect. Harry stood too, abruptly. His microphone pack tugged awkwardly at his jacket. You're making a mistake, he said sharply. A massive one. Lorraine didn't step back. I'm setting a boundary. Harry laughed, but there was no humor left now. Only anger. You think this will end well for you? He snapped. Do you have any idea how this will look? Lorraine's response was immediate. I know exactly how it looks. She turned slightly, angling her body toward the nearest camera. It looks like someone standing up for their audience. The control room fell silent. The producer gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Lorraine looked back at Harry. I think it's time for you to leave. For a heartbeat, Harry didn't react. Then his eyes widened. You can't be serious. I am, Lorraine said. Security will escort you out. The words hung in the air like a dropped glass, sharp, final. Two figures moved at the edge of the set. Security. Harry looked around, disbelief morphing into fury. This is outrageous, he snapped. You'll regret this. Lorraine didn't raise her voice. The only regret would be staying silent. Harry ripped the microphone from his jacket, the pack clattering loudly against the studio floor. You're nothing, he spat. A nobody with a sofa and a script. Lorraine's expression didn't change. And yet, she replied evenly, I'm the one asking you to leave. The security guard stepped closer. Harry hesitated, just for a second, then turned sharply toward the exit. But he stopped. Turned back. Pointed. You will regret this, he said, voice trembling with rage. Lorraine met his stare. I'm comfortable with who I am, she said softly. Can you say the same? Harry's mouth opened, then closed. He turned and stormed off, the door slamming behind him with a sound that echoed through the studio like a gunshot. No one spoke. No one moved. Lorraine stood alone beneath the lights, the cameras still rolling, the nation watching. She exhaled. And turned slowly back toward her chair. The door slammed. The sound echoed longer than it should have, bouncing off studio walls, ricocheting through the control room, lingering in the air like the final note of a song played far too loud. For a split second, no one moved. Not the crew. Not the cameras. Not the woman standing alone beneath the lights. Lorraine Kelly remained exactly where she was. Her hands were clasped lightly in front of her, shoulders relaxed, posture steady. If her heart was racing, it didn't show. If adrenaline surged through her veins, she kept it contained, tucked neatly behind decades of discipline and grace. The cameras were still rolling. The red lights still glowed. Millions were still watching. Slowly, deliberately, Lorraine turned back toward her chair. She sat down with care, smoothing the front of her jacket, grounding herself in small, familiar movements. Only then did she lift her eyes to the lens directly in front of her. For a moment, she didn't speak. And that silence, calm, intentional, unflinching, said more than any argument ever could. Well, she said at last, her voice steady, warm, unmistakably hers. That was unexpected. A soft exhale rippled through the studio. Someone behind the cameras let out a breath they hadn't realized they were holding. But I want to say something, Lorraine continued, her tone shifting, gentler now, but no less firm. To everyone watching at home. She leaned forward slightly. You are not beneath anyone. Your work matters. Your life matters. You matter. And please, don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise. The control room erupted. It started with one person clapping, a sharp, spontaneous sound, then another, then another. Within seconds, the entire crew was applauding. Camera operators, sound technicians, floor managers, producers. People who had seen thousands of broadcasts, thousands of interviews, knew instinctively when they had just witnessed something rare. This wasn't chaos. This was clarity. Lorraine smiled, not the polished on-air smile, but the real one. The kind that reached her eyes. The kind viewers had trusted for decades. Right, she said lightly, glancing at her notes. Let's get back to what we do best, shall we? The professionalism of it landed just as hard as the confrontation itself. Coming up after the break, she continued, we have a wonderful chef who's going to show us how to make the perfect Sunday roast. A gentle laugh rippled through the studio. Because, Lorraine added, with a knowing glint, that's what really matters. The everyday moments. The simple joys. The things that bring us together. The cameras cut to commercial. And only then did Lorraine let out a long, quiet breath. Her producer rushed toward her, concern etched across their face. Are you okay? Lorraine nodded slowly. I'm fine, she said. Then, after a beat, better than fine. That needed to happen. Another producer stepped in, eyes wide. The phones are going mad. Social media's exploded. Everyone's on your side. Lorraine waved a hand gently. It's not about sides, she replied. It's about standards. Beyond the set, raised voices echoed faintly down the corridor. Harry's voice, sharp, angry, demanding apologies, threatening consequences, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. But no one was rushing to soothe him now. No one was scrambling to fix it. The moment had passed. And the truth had been seen. Back on set, Lorraine checked her makeup in a small compact mirror. Her hands were steady. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by something quieter, certainty. 30 seconds to air. She closed the mirror, straightened her shoulders, and smiled as the red camera light blinked on once more. Welcome back, she said brightly, as if the last segment had been nothing more than a passing cloud. The chef walked on set visibly nervous, glancing around as if unsure how to follow what had just happened. Lorraine noticed immediately. She leaned toward them, lowered her voice. And smiled. You're doing brilliantly, she said softly. Let's have a bit of fun, yeah. And just like that, the tension melted. She asked about their background. Complimented their technique. Listened, really listened, as they spoke. She made them feel important. Seen. Valued. Because to Lorraine Kelly, in that moment, they were. The show rolled on. Fashion segments. Book reviews. A heartfelt interview with a local hero who had saved a child from icy water. Lorraine gave each guest her full attention, her full respect, the same way she always had. But something had changed. Viewers felt it. The crew felt it. The nation felt it. They had seen steel beneath the warmth. In the green room. Staff whispered in disbelief. Did that really just happen? A young assistant murmured. A veteran crew member shook their head slowly, a smile tugging at their lips. It did, they said. And it was bloody brilliant. When the show finally wrapped, the studio lights dimming, cameras powering down, Lorraine remained seated for a moment longer. She looked around the set she had called home for decades. She knew, without doubt, that she'd made the right choice. Her producer approached again. The network wants to speak with you. Lorraine smiled calmly. I'm sure they do. Tell them I'll be available in 20 minutes. I want to thank the crew first. And she did. She walked the floor, thanking every camera operator, every technician, every assistant. Because she understood something that morning had made painfully clear. Real power doesn't come from titles. It doesn't come from privilege. It comes from integrity. What happened on that set would be replayed for weeks. Debated. Analyzed. Shared millions of times. Headlines would scream about confrontation and drama and shock. But that wasn't the real story. The real story was about a woman who knew her worth. Who drew a line. Who refused to let kindness be mistaken for weakness. In just 37 seconds, everything changed. Not because a prince lost his temper. But because a host chose her values over convenience. And that, more than anything, is why it mattered. If you felt the weight of this moment. If you believe respect should never be optional. If stories like this deserve to be told, like this video. Comment your thoughts below. Subscribe for more cinematic stories that pull back the curtain on power, pride, and the moments that define history. And share this with someone who believes integrity still matters. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is calmly ask someone to leave.